the newest sci-fi movie to be directed by Denis Villeneuve and covers roughly the first half of the novel Dune. Basically, the plot of Dune is this. There is this substance that exists in this galaxy known only as spice. It basically can extend human life. It is crucial for interstellar travel, and everyone in the universe is basically going after this spice. Those who own it are the wealthiest in this galaxy. The House of Atreides is currently on this quest to obtain spice. The heir to the House of Atreides is named Paul. He's the main character of this movie, played by Denis Villeneuve. But during this quest or mission or whatever you want to call it, he's been experiencing some visions, a lot of them including this girl played by Zendaya. Visions of war, visions of him being a leader, visions of him creating these alliances. And through all that, you have a movie filled with alliances, betrayals, battles, and quests throughout this galaxy. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the last 2 years, really. This was supposed to come out in 2020. I believe this was my second most anticipated movie of 2020 behind Tenet. But, 2020 was 2020, so this movie got delayed nearly an entire year. But my excitement for this movie never wavered. This was still, I believe, either my second or third most anticipated movie of this year. And there was a lot for me to be excited for. Denis Villeneuve, I think, has quickly established himself as not just one of the best directors working today, but maybe one of the best directors of all time, namely in the sci-fi genre. Between Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, he's really found the healthy balance between art house and mainstream. Typically, if you release a sci-fi movie, it's going to fall under one of those two categories. And if it's too art housey, the general audience isn't going to really like it. Critics will adore it. On the other hand, if it's too mainstream, well, critics aren't really going to like it, but audiences will think it's great. Somehow he's found the really healthy middle, and it led to two of the best sci-fi movies I've seen in recent years. So naturally, when I found out he was going to be making a movie based off of maybe the most acclaimed sci-fi novel ever, written by Frank Herbert, of course I was excited for it. And then I saw the cast he had. The cast for this movie is ridiculous. Timothy Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Oscar Isaac, Zendaya, Dave Bautista, Stellan Skarsgård, Javier Bardem, Jason Momoa. It's ridiculous. You get that many people involved in your movie, chances are it's going to be really good. And what we got here is probably the first half of what will be regarded as Denis Villeneuve's best movie to date. I loved everything about this movie. This, once again, stays to what Denis Villeneuve is capable of doing. He creates a sci-fi movie that is going to be loved by everyone who loves and appreciates movies. First of all, we'll just get into the cast of this movie. Timothy Chalamet is easily the star of this movie. He is the main character. I haven't seen him in a whole lot. He's been in some of the smaller scale movies, like, the Oscar buzz movies. I haven't really seen any of the ones that have featured him. This is the first time I've really featured him in a lead role, or seen him in a lead role. And he absolutely crushes it. I mean, he's the kind of character you can get on board with pretty quickly. I mean, he's pretty timid, he kind of keeps to himself. He's not looking towards being the leader of the House of Atreides. He's not really sure if that's the destiny that's meant for him. It's a typical plot with a hero, like, they have this destiny lined up for them, they're not sure if they can handle it, or if they're not ready to handle it, and along the way they need to learn to be ready for it. It's the kind of quest you can easily get on board with your main character, and I think he played the character so well to a point it's easy to root for him. But really, there's no one in this movie that does a poor job in this movie. Oscar Isaac and Rebecca Ferguson play his mother and father. Both of them are great. I love the responsibility they feel towards their son. I like seeing their perspective. Like, it's not always easy being the parent in like a royal bloodline, but they're prepared to help him grow in any way that they can, even in ways that may affect them. You have other characters like Josh Brolin and Javier Bardem. They're not in the movie for very much, but when they're in it, they have scenes that really stand out and are important. Jason Momoa, I thought, was fucking great in this movie. I really loved his character. I loved the relationship he has with Paul, the sort of mentor role he has with them. And this dude was funny. It was never like awkward timed humor. He always just like had a few like snarky remarks that he made as part of his banter with Paul. It really made the movie feel a little bit more authentic. Stellan Skarsgård was also great in this movie as the villain of this movie. He's not really in the forefront a whole lot. He's more of a background villain, but I will say, when he's on screen, when he does what he does, he's extremely menacing. He clearly means business, and he will take out anyone who gets in his way. I don't know if he's going to be the main villain in the next movie. I know there's a character in this movie that's alluded to as the Emperor several times throughout it, but we never see this character, or if we do, he's never revealed to us, so my guess is he'll maybe take more of a backseat in the next movie, but for what he was worth in this movie, I thought he was great. I was going to say this right now, from a technical perspective, this is by far and away the best movie I've seen this year. This is, from a technical perspective, probably a flawless movie. Visually, this movie is just beautiful to look at. I mean, it has some of the best visual effects I have seen probably ever. I mean, it feels, honestly, visually like a modern-day Star Wars. The planets we visit, the different settings for the different houses we encounter, the different creatures that some of our heroes run into. It's all so original looking. I mean, I know I just compared it to Star Wars, like a modern-day Star Wars, but it has so much going for it in the sense that it looks so real, and it's something that I've never totally seen before in a movie. It really sucks you in, and it makes you feel like you're a part of it. You are in a different galaxy. Even the costume design, I'm not someone who really gets into that typically, but I love how all the different houses had different looks, different appearances, different ways of life, or different codes. It has a very political feel for it. In a lot of ways, I've heard some reviewers call this galactic Game of Thrones. It absolutely feels like that to an extent. Every different group felt like a different group, and had different ways about how they want to go about their ways of life. And I think that's going to be interesting for audiences. They'll probably watch us and connect with different houses as this movie goes along. With that, there could also come one of the flaws that some people might have with this movie. This movie is around 2.5 hours long, and at times it can feel that way. Now, I will say this much. If you're someone who's not really a fan of slow movies, well, then you might not really be a fan of this movie. This movie might bore you at times. For me, it honestly didn't bother me because I understood why this was a slow movie. This is building on not really a world, it's building on a galaxy. You have these different houses, you have these different stories, a lot of different characters. You gotta give them all development. They all need to matter, they all need to have meaning. So because of that, you have to delve very deep into what each of these characters can do, what they bring, what these different worlds consist of. And because of that, you need to have a slow movie. It can't just be very fast-paced, like, okay, this person's this person's that, and this world is this. Because if you do that, we're not going to care for all of them. Denis Villeneuve wants all these characters to matter, and I appreciate that. There's not a whole lot of action in this movie, but there is action in this movie. When it happens, it's very, very well shot, well filmed, well executed. It's not like how it can be in a lot of these sci-fi action movies where it's really grand scale and there's a lot of shaky cam and a whole lot's going on. The fight scenes in this movie are very concentrated. They're not very small scale. The situation is very big scale, but it's not like a bunch of, spaceships firing at each other or anything like that. It's very contained, and I appreciated that. The movie understands that not everything needs to be big, over-the-top, world-ending scale. We can have this to use for this movie. This type of action works for this story, so let's use it for this story. It's a very original sci-fi movie. And again, that's just something I've always admired with Denis Villeneuve when it's come to his sci-fi movies. Blade Runner 2049 is a great example. He could have turned that into an action franchise. He didn't. He felt the movie Blade Runner needed a sequel, could get a very worthy sequel that relates to that story. He made it, and that's that. Like, we don't know if we'll get another Blade Runner movie after that. It just, he felt it needed to be what it was, and it was. He's never tried to make something more bigger or bolder or anything like that to get more people in to see movies. Could he have maybe sold out a little bit more fireworks and space fights or something like that to get the general audience in to see this movie? Sure, I bet he could have, but he knew it wouldn't work for this type of story. He's not going to sacrifice what's going to work for this story just to get more people in the seats. He cares about making a great movie first, because he knows, you make a great movie, audiences will come to see it. And to be honest, this movie didn't really need to rely on big, giant scale action. This movie had a lot of really thrilling and intense scenes when it really needed to have them. Whether it's someone being captured by an enemy, or these creatures hunting our protagonists, or a fight to the death, whatever it could be, there are very intense moments that keep you on the edge of your seat and have you very interested in how these characters are going to go about their journey. As far as any other flaws that people might have with this movie, I'm going to say this right now. If you're a big Zendaya fan, you might be disappointed. Her character is important to the story. I mean, she's someone that Paul keeps having these visions about, and we don't really see her in person until about the final 5 minutes of the movie. Now I will say this much. She's probably going to have a massive role in Dune Part 2 whenever that's made, and I'm sure it'll be her and Timothée Chalamet running the show in the next movie. But for now, you don't see very much of her. She's in the final 5 minutes, has a few clips here and there throughout the movie, but she's not one of the big stars in this movie. So if you were hoping for that, it's not here. The only other real flaw that I would have with this movie, but it's not even really a flaw, it's not even really a fear anymore. This is technically half of one movie. And here's the thing, when you split a book into 2 parts, or multiple parts, however it is, typically the ending of the first part can go one of 2 ways. It can stand on its own and just be its very own movie, or it can, feel a little bit, how do I say this? Not unfulfilling, but it ends on a complete hook, and you're just like, well, this can't be the end of this. Like, if part 2 doesn't happen, then this is just going to feel empty. I'll give you a couple examples. You look at It Chapter 1. It Chapter 1 completely stands as its own movie, but it covers the first half of the book It. That's why when It Chapter 2 is made, it is not really a sequel to It Chapter 1, it's a continuation of the story. But the thing is, you don't have to watch It Chapter 2 immediately after watching It Chapter 1. It Chapter 1 could just stand on its own as its own movie. On the other side, you look at Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is very clearly half of one movie. The way that movie ends, it doesn't totally stand on its own. Like, you're probably not going to watch Part 1 of Deathly Hallows without immediately watching Part 2 of Deathly Hallows right after it. In a way, this kind of feels, I would say, sort of like somewhere in the middle between It Chapter 1 and Deathly Hallows Part 1. I'm not going to say that it can't stand on its own. I think this is an awesome movie. I absolutely loved it. I think it's great. But that being said, if Dune Part 2 wasn't going to be made, which, the fear for the longest time was that it may not be made due to, COVID, and it being released simultaneously on HBO Max, would it make the money that it needs to greenlight a sequel? There was a real fear for a while that Part 2 may not happen. And if it wouldn't, then this would definitely feel empty. It would definitely feel like a movie it's like, well, I don't love it as much now because it's not leading to anything. Thankfully, I found out literally 20 minutes before I made this video for you guys that Part 2 had officially been greenlit. It's going to happen. I believe the planned release date is 2023, sometime there. I don't know. But that's good news. Now we know that this is not the end. This really is just the beginning. So there's that. If you walk out of this movie really hoping for Part 2, immediately wanted to watch Part 2, well, then the short answer is, I guess the movie did its job. So all in all, Dune is just a masterwork of what sci-fi should be. The entire cast is absolutely phenomenal. I cannot wait to see these characters again. I can't wait to get more attached to these characters. You're attached to a lot of them by the end of the movie. I love the politics in this movie. I love the galaxy that is in this movie. The action when it happens is so well executed and so well filmed. The movie knows when to have the right kind of tone for the movie. When it wants to be intense, it is intense. When it wants to be a little more lighthearted, it is. When it wants to have you frustrated with some characters or maybe with what they're capable of doing, it's there. Some characters maybe you wish were fleshed out a little bit more, and the way the movie ends, it really, really leaves you wanting more. But the good news to keep in mind is this is just half of one movie. And I really believe that, similar to Lord of the Rings, when this comes out, when Part 2 comes out, and you splice them both together as this one giant super movie, we're going to have a sci-fi movie that we're going to be talking about for the rest of time. I absolutely love this movie. I loved every second. I loved every frame. I cannot wait for Part 2. In the end, I went into this movie hoping for what could be not just a great movie, but the start of the next great franchise. And I believe we're getting that with the talks of the new movies that could be coming out, not just the part 2, but from other books, a TV show that could be in the works. I mean, this could be the next big thing. It feels like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and Game of Thrones all spliced together, and what we got is something special. So that's all I gotta say, guys. Thanks so much for watching my video, and as always, don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.